Dan, good morning. How are you, bud?
I'm doing good. How are you guys today?
Doing well.
We are living the dream, and I think we like everything we hear coming out of Halas Hall. We're in that honeymoon period. How do you
It's
not
easy
like
to like,
it?
though, Dan. You have to acknowledge it's very easy to like because it's got charisma, it's got energy, it's got intent.
No question about all of that. And I'm feeling the energy. I'm feeling the buzz. I'm feeling the familiarity of the intoxication of April here. And as we all know, I made a request to Grody yesterday that after every session the Bears hold between now and the first preseason game, that Jalen Johnson comes to the media room last to say, none of this means anything until we win football games. Because I think Jalen's ability to emphasize that over and over again is sort of appropriately sobering when you're in the middle of the honeymoon period that we're in.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And, quite frankly, I think as we think about everybody that talked yesterday, there is this kind of weird, starry-eyed, oh, look, the coach came in, he threw the door open, and in through the room he came, and you could feel the unbelievable presence in the room, and he said, pop quiz, and we all went crazy with joy. Like, what the hell is going on?
It sounds
there?
pretty dramatic. It was very dramatic.
I do think that Caleb was playing that up a little bit to have a little bit of a flair for storytelling, understanding that that's what the room was sort of fishing for. And so this is part of it, right? And that's why I say that Jalen's so important to the story, because he's the guy that says, hey, relax, we've done this before. Hey, relax. I sat through Matt Nagy's meetings. I've sat through Matt Eberflus's meetings. I've seen Hard Knocks hype videos. I know how this builds up, and the hope and the optimism sort of mushroom, and then you've just got to figure out a way to filter out what's actually meaningful. David, to your point, I think what's meaningful here is you have a coach that has everyone's attention with a track record of being proven at what he does best as an offensive play caller, and now they're curious to see, okay, can he lead an entire football team? And right out of the gates, I think Ben has captured everyone's attention and to some extent their imagination with how competitive he is, how passionate he is, how intense he can be. I think that's meaningful, and they've got to just be able to turn that into work habits, which then lead to results.
Dan, I really found interesting your back and forth with Jalen Johnson, specifically on what we call traveling and following the number one wide receiver on whichever side of the ball he lines up, something that the Bears have been very reluctant to do with previous defensive coordinators with Jalen Johnson. Doesn't appear that's going to be the case with Dennis Allen. It appears that Jalen Johnson will lock up with the number one wide receiver for the opposing team. It's something he relishes as a challenge, and I wonder what you think about that shift and how much impact it might have.
Well, look, that's what happens when you shift to a defensive system that leans more heavily on man coverage. You can do more man coverage things, like let your top corner travel with the best receiver. And so Jalen's obviously been raising his hand to do this for a long time. He's gotten a couple opportunities throughout his career to do so. But I think that Dennis Allen is going to lean into that and say, look, like, you're a Pro Bowl cornerback. We've paid you a lot of money to be here. Let's see what you can do to be one of the focal points of our game plan every week. And so it's going to be fun, I think, to watch DA get his fingerprints on this defense, because it's going to be different, and it's going to have a style that I think plays to some of the strengths of this team. They're going to have to get a little bit more team speed. They're going to have to get some more teeth to the pass rush, as we've talked about forever. But I think the guys that are returning feel like they've got enough manpower to make this a really good defense really quickly.
So there's all sorts of rumors floating around regarding the draft. I know we still have a little bit of time, but a lot of fantasy football players seem to be kind of gazing into the future and trying to figure out what can the offensive coach add to the offense. What will they? I got to tell you, I'm still a line of scrimmage guy. You just said pass rusher. Why aren't we talking more about that? Why are we kind of ignoring an obvious way to make half your team significantly better?
No, we can, and we should probably over the next 2 weeks kind of put that back at the center stage of the discussion. And I've just been pretty, kind of emphatic the last few weeks in saying that doesn't have to happen at number 10. Yep. You got 4 picks in the top 75. So if you do decide to make one of these quote unquote luxury picks at 10 and add an offensive weapon, for Ben Johnson to play around with. You just have to do so with intent at 39 and 41 and 72 to go get those other meat and potatoes, trenches guys that are going to help you, be good up front, which we've been talking about forever, has been overlooked. So it's going to be fun to see how they put that package together and what those first 4 picks on days 1 and 2 look like, because that should be an area this year in this draft that helps you get significantly better. And now they got to figure out that path to doing so.
So Dan, back to Caleb, because I think it was interesting talking about his biggest adjustment and what it will be in being behind center more often than not, more than he's probably used to. So he's got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. How big of an issue do you think that will be, and how much should the Bears be conscious of not using that as an excuse if things start slowly?
Issue for me is not the right phraseology. I think it is going to be a learning curve that's going to be kind of steep, and I think that with our eyes during the practices that we're able to watch in the spring, and then obviously as we get into training camp, we just have to be ready for it to be a little bit sloppy initially, for Caleb to be working through the footwork and polishing that up, being able to visualize route concepts that have to time up with what he does coming out from under center, as opposed to being in shotgun like he was so much of the time a year ago. And so it's just something that they've got to lean into on both sides. But I do think you heard from Caleb yesterday, and it married up with what he said in January when he first met Ben Johnson, is that he has trust in what his coach is telling him. It's a big deal. Like, trust creates belief, and then all of a sudden you don't have any pushback to when they're coaching you. And Caleb has said, "Hey, I want to be coached hard. I want to be pushed hard." Ben says, "Watch me," and off they go with obviously the first mission to be this under center thing to get him comfortable to help unlock the offense at a new level.
I'm very curious as I look at this draft stuff and I hear people talk about the quarterback class, and there isn't a great quarterback class. It would seem that Cam Ward's going number 1 overall, but Shedeur Sanders is really kind of a guy that no one can figure out. And as you listen to the things people are saying about him, they're talking about the position of quarterback in the NFL, and that there has been a change in that position, and you want someone that is not necessarily a pocket passer, but someone that can do damage with their legs as well. And those are the top quarterbacks in the league, as we know. Do you think that he will be available when the Bears select? And I only asked that question, if only one quarterback is gone, maybe they could then make a trade of some kind and not move very far, but pick up something due to the quarterback issue. There seems like a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. Could that be a hot position all of a sudden? Or do you think that people really don't want a pocket passer? They are concerned about the number of sacks a quarterback can get himself into.
It's a team by team discussion, and it's really a player by player discussion. And as it relates to the Bears at the end of the month, you're just going to be keeping close tabs on what you think is happening with these quarterback needy teams and what they might do. Because as you say, Mully, it will benefit the Bears if 2 guys are gone before they pick. It will benefit the Bears if maybe somebody thinks that Jackson Dart is somebody they have to take at 10, and they can make some calls there and try to leverage that number 10 pick into something more, particularly given the depth of this draft. So Ryan Poles and his group are going to have to be on that and figuring out what that looks like as it shapes their board up. And certainly they're rooting for the best possible menu when number 10 comes up. I think that I've said this a couple times in the last few weeks, that it's going to be hard for them to screw that up in the first round. Number 10, whether they decide to trade back, whether they decide to pick off the intriguing menu there, or get this, guys, maybe they consider moving up to like 8 or 9 or 7 if the cost is there and they see a guy that they think is an absolute difference maker. I'm thinking like a Mason Graham in that situation. If he falls, that's something to keep an eye on.
Wow.
That is an interesting scenario. I think there are a lot of intriguing scenarios, and I don't think any one option sounds that bad. So they're going to come out of it with a very good player, regardless of, even if they trade down, you figure that they're going to get somebody who's going to be a day 1 starter. Speaking of 10th picks, Darnell Wright yesterday also, I think, was entertaining, talking about watching Penei Sewell, talking about being inspired by Dan Rochar. I think there were a lot of things that we heard, at least you're up there all the time, Dan, but I think a lot of us who aren't This is a very important player to the Bears. He's ideally the anchor of that offensive line for years to come. What did we learn yesterday from Darnell Wright and how he fits into the picture?
Well, first of all, he's not going to command the room the way Ben Johnson does. He's a little bit more shy when the cameras are on and he's put on stage, and he'll give you a thing or two there. We spent so much focus on the Bears refurbishing the interior of their offensive line, and then you add that to a guy that they believed so strongly in 2 years ago that they said, hey, we're going to trade back, take Darnell Wright, and try to make him our starting tackle for the next 10 years. I go back to Tevin Jenkins' departure a few weeks ago, and that closed the book on Ryan Pace draft picks that didn't get second contracts here. Well, that can't happen, right? Like, you have to have a high volume of hits in your draft classes that you're getting to second contracts with your team. Darnell Wright has to be one of these guys that they're paying a lot of money in a few years to be that guy at the right tackle position. And now it's just a matter of how Ben Johnson envisions using him, and one of the questions came up yesterday, hey, can you throw a pass?
Right.
That's going to be a questionnaire passed around the offensive meeting room here soon. Is like, who's willing to throw some passes? And hey, I think they may even pass that questionnaire out in the defensive meeting room too, for Ben to eventually lock some of that creativity. And so Darnell might want to work on his arm a little bit too.
I like talking about the offensive line because it brings us back to one of the positions that is a complex and difficult one to understand, which is their left tackle position. I didn't have a problem with them wanting to double down a year ago with with Braxton Jones, but now he's kind of heading ever closer to his turn to get a second contract, and you have to wonder if he can't start the season.
Yeah.
They say nice things about Kiran Amagaji, which is nice that they do that. But
Right.
do we actually believe that he's a challenge or a player that could play the left tackle position? And do they need to select one? Like, how do you look at all of those complications at left tackle and look at the depth chart and not say, man, that's a good spot to get some help?
I'm a believe with my eyes guy, and I'm with you, Mully. Like, you have to add something here this month to create competition, to give yourself a little bit more confidence. We can't do what we did last year where Ryan Poles walked into training camp boasting about how strongly he felt about the quality of depth on his offensive line, and then that was not a strong point of the football team. And it was a weak point because they had a lot of guys that weren't reliable and weren't capable of playing all the time. And so you can't rely on either Braxton Jones or Kiran Amagaji to be the guy that you think is going to be the long-term answer there. Because listen, like Braxton Jones, we have no idea how he's going to come back from the season-ending injury that he suffered in December. So you can't leave yourself exposed and hoping and praying and crossing your fingers and being like, I really hope it works out. You better find somebody there that can compete and give you some peace of mind.
And just to add to that, you also can't say, well, he needs a little more anchor. Oh, by the way, he's coming back from surgery. He can't play.
Well,
but we got to get more weight.
But increase your mobility.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to.
This seems contradictory.
So that's a project, right? And Kiran Amagaji is a project, and so you don't want to have too many projects going on at once, and not feel like you're solidified and secure at one of those core positions on your offensive line.
Dan, so I called Case Keenum a $3 million insurance policy, and I think that's probably the best way to look at it. That didn't surprise me that they added him to the room. I guess it amused me more than anything that the Bears quietly have been very proactive in making clear that Tyson Bagent remains the number 2 quarterback, that this is not necessarily a threat to him, and nobody should view it that way, even though I do wonder if we're going to end up viewing it that way.
If Case Keenum needs Mark Sanchez's number, I'll pass it along, because this was the role that Mark Sanchez was in 2017 with Mitch Trubisky and Mike Glennon in front of him on the depth chart. And he was around, to provide veteran wisdom and guidance and a voice in the room that could help steer things in the right direction. We'll see how that all shapes up. But certainly internally, since the day that Tyson Bagent became a Bear as an undrafted rookie a couple years ago, they felt very strongly about who he is as a quarterback and who he can be. And they don't really have any intent of unseating him as QB2. And so the dynamics of that room have to kind of come together here and quickly. And Tyson has gotten a vote of confidence privately from the organization that he'll stick in that number 2 role until further notice.
Yeah, but we don't even know yet the results of the pop quiz. So he may have already been. Case may be ahead of Caleb, for all we know.
That's right.
You don't know, right? And like, I'm sure we'll get a dramatic recap of the pop quiz results and how those were unveiled the next time we're up there next week. I really got to go back and listen to how you described it in the opening, Mully, because I think it was perfectly that you had the prose flowing there with the way you described Caleb's recount of the doors flying open. Grody described it as kind of like a old Western saloon with the doors flying open. And like, I'm here, Cowboys. It's time to take the pop quiz, you know?
Speaking of Grody, so I know you guys did the podcast. It's a really good podcast, Take the North podcast. And I think
Are you familiar with it?
I love it. I love listening to it. I miss it a lot. And I know you told the story about your trip back from the owners' meetings on the plane. Can you, in a nutshell, describe how difficult of a journey that was for you?
It was like a 9.5 minute story I told on the podcast. I got to boil it down to about 40 seconds here, but napping in 17C exit row, leg gets hit very violently. People on the plane are looking in all directions. I'm trying to figure out what happened. I see stewardess running up and down the aisle with napkins. Somebody got sick in row 8 and decided to projectile vomit all down the aisle of the flight. Got 14C, 15C, 16C, 17C, and 18C.
Oh, my God.
Disgusting little event there. And so if you're ever griping about getting a middle seat, sometimes it's better than the aisle.
Wow. That's a rough trip.
That's unbelievable.
Not pleasant. Not pleasant. I actually give myself a lot of credit. I stayed strong. And didn't let it shake me too much.
Dan,
thankfully, I had a zip up jacket on that I just quickly removed, asked the flight attendant for a trash bag, and dumped it everywhere.
It sounds like The Exorcist. It sounds like how do you hit that many seats?
Oh, the other footnote to this is in 15B, Larry Mayer was a witness to all of it.
Oh, well, at least in next to you, small consolation, you weren't sitting next to Biggs. Because then
it would not have been pleasant.
It would not have been pleasant.
Brad would not have handled it.
That's right.
Brad would not have been as mentally strong or as outwardly calm as I was if he got thrown up.
Did anyone get mad? Did anybody say anything? Or
I think it was like, you're just in a state of shock, honestly.
Yeah,
so it was hard, and you feel bad for the guy that got sick. Actually, David, I think Brad would have somehow found a way to get like 50% ownership in American Airlines.
That's right. Yes. He'd have got a lot of miles.
He'd have got all the 7,000 points.
Yeah, we had some Marriott points added to it. Yes. We know how that would have turned out. We've seen it before.
We all know that story.
Yeah. Great stuff, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, guys. Have a good one.